Before we begin, thank you very much to Skyla P for joining the Patreon campaign. Thank you very much for the help. All of the assistance is appreciated, and it all goes toward putting all of this on a daily basis for everybody. I wish soon we're going to get into exactly what I've been doing behind the scenes because, oh boy, this is going to be a huge year of growth for me and what I am doing. So stay tuned. A lot is on the way. Okay, so let us discuss an unusual Transformers toy line called GDO. Real quick, just to get it out there, if you're wondering where the promised Yellow Park videos for the week went, they kind of got put on the back burner when my body decided, hey, you're gonna have another sinus infection. Okay, great. So there's my energy for the next week. I'm feeling fine now. Everything's mostly cleared up. But it did mean that went to the back burner, and this had to come to the front burner. So we're going to be talking about this unusual line called GDO, an extension of the Generations line from about roughly 2012-ish. This was a fascinating thing for us because for the first time, it seemed like Hasbro Asia was putting out something that was exclusive to their markets. You know, places like China, the Philippines, Singapore, etc. And that kind of put a little bit of worry in fans because some of this looked really interesting because it was very bizarre stuff. And just interesting stuff. So when we kind of wondering, like, how do we get a hold of these? And there was like a little, like, there was a temporary fascination with it. Well, lo and behold, they eventually came over to the US in 2012 as part of Toys R Us's big push of exclusives for the holidays. So we did eventually get a hold of them. However, things were not quite the way they were before with the line. So we're going to do a whole overview of the toy line itself. And that is going to start with the packaging, which what you see here is not the Chinese packaging for the toy. See, apparently Hasbro leaned into the fan base knowing that these were like special exclusives out of Asia and included Chinese lettering on the packaging. They had never done anything like that before. Because if you look at the ones released by Hasbro Asia, they just look like normal Generations figures. You know, it's the same standard everything. The only weird difference that they did for that release is, you'll notice, they packaged the toys in robot mode, which to this point Hasbro had done for its smallest and largest of figures when it made sense, but they had never done it to any of the main toys in between. This is the first time it really happened for deluxes. So maybe it's a test run because it was just a few years later that we started getting deluxes and Voyagers all in robot mode. But who knows? That's me wildly speculating. For now, it just kind of made it a little bit more interesting. You know, it made it stand out against all the other Generations figures, despite the fact that it was on the same card back and otherwise did not indicate that it was a special release in any way. So that was always a weird thing for the toy line to do, but it did make it stand out in both markets, so fair play. So we're going to start with the Legends class figures, and this is like the original old school Legends classes, which were like real small, like cost you like $5 when you found them. And these were mostly repaints, as you can see here with Hoist, being obviously a repaint of Trailbreaker, to the point where he doesn't really even get his own head sculpt. He's still got the hollow emitter over his head. You will notice, however, there is a change because Trailbreaker did not come with a rifle. That is something that GDO added in, and in fact, all of the Legends got an accessory weapon, which to that point was extraordinarily rare for Legends class, but they also made sure that the toys had been properly remolded to actually accommodate said weapons. You know, so for instance, this guy, he has been retooled so that he can actually store his sword in vehicle mode as well as hold it in robot mode. This is not Nemesis Prime. This is not even Scourge. This is Motor Breath. So you can tell by the shape of the sword, it's supposed to be a Motormaster homage at a time in which they did not have the name Motormaster available. So someone at Hasbro Legal said that Motor Breath, close enough. It's a weird one. in the realm of evil Optimus Prime repaints, it's a very odd one for him to just suddenly be Motormaster. Now let's keep in mind, technically, Titanium Rodimus has also been Motormaster, so I guess no Autobot leader can escape it. You just wait, Star Saber's going to come out as a Motormaster homage someday. It's just destiny now. The Blue Streak I always liked too. I always thought this mold looked really, really good as Blue Streak. They remolded it to remove the light bar from the Prowl release, and of course, that is a gun based on the one his G1 toy had, which is neat. I also like the fact there's another peg on the back, like you're actually going to wield this thing like a sword at some point. But no, like for a little simple mold, it kind of sings in these colors. I kind of like it. Always kind of did. And then there's the Thundercracker they did, which I thought was exceptionally clever. Now, the mold itself, I've always really liked, because aside from just the fact that it's a neat little version of the G1 Seeker design, I always thought it was genius to actually take some of the kibble and some of the panel from the jet mode and make it actually turn into like a semblance of the null rays on the arms without having to include them as extra accessories that could easily get lost at that size. That was genius. That was pretty brilliant. And then Hasbro Asia just went and gave him the null rays anyway, which he has to hold in his hands. It's an oddball one, but again, I thought it was clever. And hey, cool, they actually got 2 guns. So they actually put a little bit more budget into Thundercracker. So from here, we're going to move into the Scout-based figures. And yesterday's video is actually what made me think of today's video, because yeah, there's technically 4 repaints we didn't talk about, because they're not technically part of that run of Scout class figures. They were used for GDO. And all 4 are just straight repaints. So this is about the only size class that didn't get any additional tricks to it. And it starts with this guy who seems like a very generic looking Decepticon. But I will tell you his name is Brawl. This is a version of Brawl for GDO. I will admit, colors look real good on it. Of course, it's military green on a military vehicle, so of course it's going to look fine. I like that they did include like the D67 on the side. That's a fun inclusion. Despite the fact that this is just a straight repaint of Breacher, it does a really good job of conveying it as a different character. And I think that's just down to just how good that head sculpt looks in those colors. I think that works a lot. And it's just surprising how different it looks just by changing the paint application. It's actually a pretty brilliant repaint. Less brilliant is this guy. This is Sandstorm. As I just realized, my overlay is not where it's supposed to be. There, fixed. Apologies for that. Let's actually go on like we actually know what we're doing around here. So this was back in an era where Hasbro really did not want to do any triple changers. Keep in mind, that's a lot of extra engineering and a lot of extra parts, generally for characters that don't really have things that can be repainted or retooled into. This was well before Hasbro started getting super clever with its retooling and repainting. So if they didn't have something obvious, they basically didn't use it. So yeah, the likes of, say Blitzwing and Octane and all them became exceptionally rare to see. However, they wanted to keep some names alive and use some old characters, so Sandstorm got this tiny little dune buggy with obviously no helicopter mode to be seen. This is one of those crowbarred in color schemes that kind of works. I'll admit, it doesn't look bad. It's a passing resemblance at best to Sandstorm. But you know what? I'll give it credit. I've seen worse. Seen worse on this mold. That leads us to this guy. Now, you're immediately going to say, oh, they did a Wild Rider. No, they did not. The name is Dead End. So, this is a breakdown toy designed to look more movie in aesthetic that was repainted into Wild Rider but named Dead End. This again comes down to trademark issues. The name Wild Rider likely not available at the time, so they used another Stunticon name that was available, but it does leave him with a bit of an identity crisis. That said, it don't look bad in that mold. That color does not look bad on that mold. It ain't bad at all. Yeah, this is the kind of fun. So, what this really puts me in the mindset of is like the mid 2000s, like the Unicron trilogy homage repaints, where you can see the logic of why that color scheme was picked, even though it does kind of feel a little bit forced in. That said, I mean, it still looks neat. I mean, the mold does look really good in those colors. But no one compares to the final member of this batch, and that is Laserbeak. Oh my god, that's such a good job. That's so inspired. That is inspired. Aside from the fact that, yeah, silver, red, black, very hard to make it look bad. I love that the original wing deco is present here in the vehicle mode. It looks awesome. It looks absolutely awesome. You know, the kind of thing like, like the kind of upgrade that Ravage got that none of the other cassettes got. This is one of them. This is one of them, which is cool to see. Wish they do more things like this. That's going to take us into the deluxes, and the deluxes all got a little bit of extra work to them. Now, a lot of the deluxes are going to include, and Voyagers as well, now that I think of it, they're going to start including new heads. All of them getting new heads. And the heads are either going to be brand new tooling, or they're going to be pre-existing ones that Hasbro and Takara never got around to their intended use. And that's going to start with Swerve. We've seen this Swerve on the channel before. We've talked about Swerves just in general, on the whole. And it's still not a bad idea. It's, again, feels like a very grown-up, very, like, like adulted version of G1 Swerve, which is not a bad direction. What else are you going to use Cup as a pickup truck for? It's going to be another G1 truck, right? And yeah, again, black and red and silver, hard to make it look bad. Still looks really good here. Makes for an interesting talking piece, too. Go back to my channel, watch the Swerve video. There's a lot of weirdness when it comes to characters just named Swerve. And this is definitely one of them. But at least this one has a semblance of sense to it. This one does too, but it's a weird one. It's a weird one. So it's the first edition Cliff Jumper. Mostly the same. The color hues are a little bit different, but it's mostly the same toy, aside from the fact it now has a G1 Cliff Jumper head. And then part of me thinks at least it wasn't a Bumblebee repaint. But also, like, that seems so uninspired, right? Like, compared to getting Swerve out of the Cup mold, compared to getting Laserbeak, this just seems meh. This just seems kind of blah. Like, this, I don't know, this just feels, it's very underwhelming. It's very underwhelming compared. Like, I feel like there's this sea of creativity when it comes to GDO, and then Cliff Jumper is just kind of like floating in that sea, trying not to drown in it. I don't know. I felt like it was a waste of opportunity. I think it could have done way cooler things with this design, way cooler things with the mold. Just made another Cliff Jumper. Which, by the way, if you track all the different versions, is like 4 different iterations of Cliff Jumper. This is a weird one. So it's using the Dark of the Moon Tomahawk mold, which is not a bad mold. It's not a bad figure. Actually, it's a reveal the... I think those... No. 2010. It's 2010. Man, the movie lines blur together once we get to 2010 for me. But no, that Tomahawk was the Transformers 2010, the Hunt for the Decepticons line. And it makes a weird Springer. Now, oddly enough, some of the chest details and all that actually do kind of make sense and kind of fit Springer's overall look. But the rest of it is very shoehorned in. The movie aesthetic really doesn't lend itself to Springer very much. And also, that head is high. The boy's got some either a very tall neck or very low shoulders, probably both at the same time. So again, this is Hasbro trying to get a character out without actually having to do a triple changer level of engineering. I will give them credit for the new head as well as the new sword. That is a new accessory that is exclusive to this toy. So credit where credit is due. They put some effort into it. Also, if you have the BotCon version of Springer, I think they make good companion pieces. One aerial, one vehicle kind of works. And that moves us on to the most infamous deluxe we've already seen on this list, and that is Wheelie. I don't know why this works. I do not know why this works, but it does. It's actually a really cool looking Wheelie, and that mold actually looks really good in the two-tone orange and gray. it's already to the benefit of the mold because it's a really, really good mold. To show that you can repaint it into something this absurd means, yeah, like like this mold just carries whatever character they paint onto him. The new head is cool, keeping the speakers works, and as well as like including the slingshot, which also has a blaster mode. So cool. They did a lot of really cool stuff with it. This is like my favorite of the entire line because it's just so weird and it shouldn't work, but it does. And that's the scariest thing about the whole process, really. If we move up into the Voyagers, we're getting into some more weird homage characters, but nothing that's unpredicted. Pretty much what we'd expect here. From what else are you gonna do? What else are you gonna do with a, like a hotspot toy? What else are you gonna do? What else are you gonna do with an Inferno toy other than make the other fire truck in G1 Transformers? Again, it's got the new head. It's a little bit less noticeable here because, it's not terribly different. And yeah, it's just kind of a blue fire truck. I'm glad that they kept the fireball on from the G1 design as a tampo on the side. That's really cool. Also, you can tell they really went in on the paint on some of these things. Little details like the windshield wipers being painted is kind of impressive, especially when you see how skimped the paint jobs are on today's Transformers. So yeah, this was a bizarre one. Not an unpleasant one, but certainly bizarre. I also like going like the dark plastic black route. Not only does it match the original toy, but it definitely separates it out from Grapple and Inferno's versions. Not a bad idea. Now we move into Power Dive. And Power Dive is weird because at first it seems like a completely original character. The name certainly isn't anything from G1 that I can remember offhand. But Power Dive seems to be loosely based on G2 Ransack with a head sculpt especially. It's not a bad look, actually. Weird as it is. I still really like the uniqueness of the jet mode, and I actually like it better than the original highbrow version that came out for Hunt for the Decepticons. It's a neat looking figure, and the head sculpt's kind of awesome. I actually really, really like the head sculpt. I guess if we're really talking about, like, weirdly enough, like, if we're really talking about it, yeah, someone's gonna call me out if I don't mention that, yes, it's technically also based on G2 Power Dive, but weirdly enough, the head sculpt seems to be based on Ransacks, and I'm not sure what they were going for there. But still, a G2 homage, especially a double G2 homage in the midst of a what is apparently a movie mold, and somewhat, it's kind of like weird G1 movie mix line. Very odd. It's a very odd pull. And that moves us into the final one, which gets even odder. It's a G2 Megatron done from the Revenge of the Fallen Bludgeon mold. I've talked about that mold at length on this channel multiple times. I've never been a fan of it because I always felt the aesthetics of it are confusing. Adding a G1 Megatron head makes things worse. This is one of the most confused figures I've ever seen, just design-wise. Design-wise, the aesthetics on this whole thing do not seem to mesh up. It feels like a kit bash. It feels like a bunch of figures meshed together. Also, I'm just going to say this. Why are you going to do G2 Megatron colors and not give him the purple camo in vehicle mode? That seems like a wasted opportunity. It's an odd one. It's a super odd one. In a line of odd ones, but true, but still weird. Weird. When we move up into the leaders, we're going to get into familiar territory, but yet unfamiliar, because the leaders were actually canceled in the US. So most watching this video were never really privy to them. However, they did exist. Now, for Hasbro Asia, they were actually released in Generations packaging. Keep in mind, Generations at the time was just deluxes. So the fact that all these were coming out, like Legend scale, Scout class scale, this was all new. Even the Voyager ones were new. So this is the only way to ever see a Generation style box at leader class size, at least as far as the original iteration of Generations goes. However, if you were in Canada, your release was not canceled. On the other hand, it was packaged like Dark of the Moon. And then again, they added Chinese to the box to push the fact that this was somewhat exclusive to Asia in some way. You got to give credit for Hasbro marketing. They knew that we were picking up on that. They knew that they knew that was somehow important to us. So yeah, a little bit more limited release, but they are out there, but they are pretty basic compared to the others. Obviously we have a Starscream that is done from the leader class mold. It's in G1 colors. They added I was going to say burn marks to the wings and the tail fins and the nose cone. It really instead it just kind of looks like he flew through a bucket of paint. It's a little bit too heavy. Also, I don't appreciate the fact that his crotch looks like the Umbrella Corps emblem. That seems ominous. The other one being a Ironhide done up in G1 colors, which, that's pretty much standard. I will admit the mold doesn't look bad in those colors. I mean, I do like it. If they'd sold it in the US, I might have grabbed it. For aftermarket prices it would go for today? Nope. Don't think I will. Don't think I will. But it is kind of interesting. It just kind of ends on like, well, yeah, we did it during movie 1. We'll just repaint these these into G1 colors. Not a big deal. But no, they did it at the leader scale. And that's kind of how the big stuff of GDO went, which is kind of disappointing compared to some of the weirdness that happened in the Scouts and the Deluxes. There was one more that was going to be released, a Voyager class toy, and we've talked about it before during the Cloud video I did, and that is Brawn. And I still do not understand why the universe decided that Swole Brawn needed to exist, but he does. Again, seeing the character this big, this bloated, it's just so weird. Like, again, it feels like a custom. It just feels like something someone made for a laugh, but we're mass producing it and selling it. Or at least we were going to. And then, for whatever reason, it's the only GDO toy that just got axed. And I'm not entirely sure why. Other than, maybe 4 Voyagers in a one-wave toy line was maybe a little much for retailers. Still, why did you include Power Dive? Why'd you include the the G2 figure, not the G1? Or at least for I assume the sake of variety. That's the best guess I got. But that's going to do it. That is Transformers GDO, a weird experimental line out of Hasbro Asia that was, for a while, a really hot topic and a really hot commodity amongst the collectors. These days, you don't really hear much about it other than, in passing weirdness, that weird bludgeon G2 Megatron, or that one wheelie that's way better than it has any right to be. But for the most part, you don't really hear about the rest of them, because I think all of them, well, okay, most of them are pretty inspired and are doing some pretty neat things that harken back to a Transformers era we don't have anymore. But you know what? That's how it goes. So that has been GDO, which, by the way, if you've heard me talking this the entire time and are still wondering, it stood for Global Development Organization. I don't entirely understand what that means, considering these were supposed to be Hasbro Asia only, and then by happenstance got released in the US, but that's what it was. You're free to wonder forever about it, as I am. But that's been the line, and that's been the video. Thank you everyone for watching. I will see you next time.